I'm not biased, but this is. Bobbin hasn't made an appearance in a video for a while, but for those who've been watching in the last 6 months since we've had him, you can see he's grown quite a bit. Alright, come on, that's enough. What are you doing? I've been working on this backpack for a friend of mine for about the last year, kind of off and on, and I'm finally on the final step, which is to bind the exterior final seam. And I experimented with a couple of different ways to do the binding, and finally decided the best way for this application was to make bias binding out of the same fabric that I used for the body of the exterior of the pack. Making bias binding just involves cutting strips of fabric and then folding them and sewing them on as binding. But it's called bias binding because you cut it on the bias. If you just cut strips from the straight edge of fabric, you won't have the same flexibility to go around curves that you'll get if you cut the strips on the bias. To find the bias, or a 45-degree angle, you just take a piece of fabric that's cut at a right angle and then just fold it over a corner until you get a triangular shape, and then you can cut that and then cut your strips out of that piece. I've already cut this piece of fabric. I'll cut my strips out of this bias that I've already made. I'm making 1-inch binding, and I'm using this bias tape maker that I bought at my local fabric store. To use this folder, I need strips of 1 3/4 inches. And as it turns out, my metal ruler here is just about the right width, so I'm just going to use it to mark off the fabric. To make a piece of binding long enough for this pack, I'm having to join 2 pieces together. The way you do that is you put them right sides together, if that matters. In this particular case, this fabric is the same on both sides, and at a right angle, so basically the 2 angled edges form a straight edge, and then I'll sew that together. Now I'll just clip off these corners. Now I need to press this seam open. The fabric I'm using is a Martexan waxed cotton canvas fabric. So I can use an iron on it with a synthetic. I tried with a synthetic, and if you get it hot enough to do any good, it melts. So, but with this I can use my super dangerous 1950s travel iron. I'm just going to press the seam open and flat so that it doesn't get too bulky when I get to that part as I'm doing the binding. So you have to pay attention at this point, because you want to make sure you insert the fabric so that the seam that you just pressed flat is facing up, or in the direction that the folds are going to go. It'll be clearer when you see it. So I'm going to insert one end into the folder, and that'll create the fold that we need. And then I need to press this fold so that it stays in place. What I found is if I place a pin through the end of the fabric and put it at a kind of a oblique, is that right, oblique angle? So that when I'm pulling against it, it's got a lot of bite into my little ironing board here. That seems to hold it in place well, so you may have to experiment with your own setup. Now I'll just press this into place. The idea is you want the iron to be close to the end of the folder as you slide the folder down the fabric. You do have to kind of watch how straight you pull on the folder. If you turn it, you can reduce the fold on one side or the other and it'll become uneven, so you just watch that as you go. I've got this teeny tiny ironing board here, so I'm going to run out of room, so I'll just move the tape up, and so that I don't have a hole in my binding. I don't know if you'd be able to see it anyway, but I'm just going to open up the fold a little bit and pin it on the fold, and that'll be inside when this is all sewn together. No one will ever see it. So. I've reached the joint where I sewed the two pieces together. I'm just going to take my time and make sure that gets fed into the folder cleanly. To apply my binding to the pack, I'm going to be using my Swing Away binding attachment from Sailrite on my Sailrite LS1 sewing machine. Well, it's true confession time. I normally like to present these videos as if everything I do is perfect. However, that went to hell in a handbasket. I've used this binder quite a bit, and it works really, really well. And but I think this pack, just the thickness and how close I need to get it to get into the binder is just too much. You know, I'm still learning all this stuff myself, so there might be a better way to do it. I've got like 4 more packs to make, so maybe I'll figure it out and I'll post a video about that. In the meantime, I've gotten my trusty old friends, the Office binder clips out, clip the binding on, and now I'm going to just sew it on the old way. So that's kind of how you make bias binding and bind the exterior of this style of backpack. If you'd like to see the details of this backpack, I'll post a video showing the details of it. I think it's worthy of its own video. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comments section below. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.